The first time I saw a human smile, I assumed it was a threat display. It wasn't the casual, mouth-only curve you see in their photographs. No, this was full teeth, just enough to show each one was in perfect working order. Where I came from, that kind of expression meant two things: you're cornered, and I'm about to make sure you never walk again. And yet, Captain James Rourke, Earth's representative to the Veteran Accords, beamed at me across the marble floor of the council chamber as if I were a long-lost drinking companion. "Ambassador Valen," he said, extending a hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Humans, I'd been briefed, had a strange fixation with pressing their hands into yours. Something about trust. To my people, exposing your forearm was an invitation to duel. I gripped his fingers cautiously. His grip was firm without being crushing, but the warmth of his skin startled me. Predators always run warm. "You honor me," I replied, voice carefully neutral. Rourke's eyes, blue, like gas flame, studied me in the way surveyors study unclaimed territory. The meeting was meant to be routine, a welcome reception for the newest species to join the Accords. Humans had arrived less than a decade ago and, by galactic standards, were still learning where the cutlery went. The event was diplomatic theater, flute music, harmless speeches, ornamental guards. But Rourke was working the room like it was his personal battlefield. He shook hands with the Kyril chieftains, complimented the Terran on their mineral exports, laughed at jokes in languages I doubted he spoke. When he turned back to me, that smile was still there. "I hear your people are famous for—" What was it? Endurance hunts, he said, conversational as a tourist. "Yes," I replied slowly. "We can track prey for days." He nodded. "Impressive. Humans used to do something similar. Walk our quarry to exhaustion. Most animals can sprint faster than us, but we outlast them." Funny, isn't it? It didn't sound funny at all. An attendant presented my people's traditional gift, a glass jar filled with luminescent moth larvae, a delicacy bred under triple moons. Rourke took it with polite thanks, held it up to the light, and passed it to one of his aides without breaking stride in the conversation. "Fascinating. So, tell me, how quickly can your fleets redeploy between sectors?" I blinked. "That depends on the urgency." He tilted his head. Of course. Just curious. Always good to know who can come to the rescue in a crisis." I felt the hair spines along my neck stiffen. Questions about fleet mobility weren't casual small talk. They were the kind of thing military analysts built simulations around. The other delegates adored him. The Varniks kept trying to feed him their ceremonial bread, which he ate without hesitation. The Forans insisted on showing him their battle scars, which he admired like they were art exhibits. Even the stone-faced Draxian envoys cracked a smile when he recounted some ancient Earth sport involving hitting a ball and then running in a circle. Every interaction left him with more information than he gave. That was the part that unsettled me. Later, as the reception wound down, I found him at the balcony overlooking the station's starfield. He stood there, hands in his pockets, studying the slow drift of freighters along the inner lanes. "Beautiful view," he said without turning. "Yes," I admitted. "The traffic is unusually light tonight." He gave a soft chuckle. "Makes you think about choke points, doesn't it? All those ships, all that cargo, move a few pieces, and the whole board changes." I stared at him. Is this conversation still about scenery? That smile again. The kind predators give when you've finally noticed the trap. "Ambassador, in my experience, everything is about the scenery. You just have to know where to stand." Back inside, the council leaders were giving their closing speeches. Grand statements about peace, prosperity, mutual trust. I caught glimpses of Rourke as the delegates milled about. He never stopped moving, never stopped smiling. The Kyril envoys, who had originally dismissed humanity as soft-bodied primates, now looked visibly reassured in his presence. The Varnik scribes, who valued hierarchy above all, whispered about the discipline in their posture. Even the Draxian warlords, who trusted no one, had agreed to a joint training exercise. He'd been here less than 3 hours. On my way out, I passed a group of junior officers, human and alien alike, laughing over something Rourke had said. I didn't catch the joke, but I noticed the humans' boots. Thick-soled, reinforced leather, polished to a shine. They were standard military issue. This was supposed to be a formal diplomatic event. Why wear combat boots unless you were ready to march? That night, I reviewed the sensor logs. During the reception, the human delegation shuttle had made 3 routine passes along the station's perimeter, just inside legal limits. Its sensors were passive, but its course mapped every entry vector and emergency launch route. When I confronted the security chief, he shrugged. They're new here. Probably curious about how we run things. I almost believed him. 2 rotations later, I found Rourke in the council archives, reading through old tactical reports from the first expansion war. Looking for bedtime stories? I asked. History, he replied. You can learn a lot about people from what they fight over, and how they fight. You expect another war? His smile didn't reach his eyes this time. Expect? No. Prepare for? Always. In my culture, we teach our young that predators rarely pounce without warning. They circle first. They test the air, the footing, the prey's reactions. If you watch closely enough, you can see the strike coming. But that night, as the human envoy left the archives with a casual wave and a grin, I realized something unsettling. Rourke wasn't circling. He was already inside the herd. The following day, the Council's internal network reported a small glitch, nothing critical, just a minor desync in traffic control protocols. Strangely, the humans had offered to help debug the issue before the report even went public. They fixed it in under an hour. The logs showed no unauthorized access, yet our entire docking schedule was now running more efficiently than it ever had before, almost as if it had been reorganized to favor certain approach vectors. When I asked Rourke about it at the next reception, he gave me that same tooth-bearing grin. Just lending a hand, Ambassador. That's what friends do, right? I have seen many kinds of smiles, triumphant, mocking, relieved, even apologetic. But the human smile is different. It is an equation you cannot solve until it is too late. By the time you understand it, you're already standing exactly where they want you. And that was the night I decided to watch the humans very closely. Unfortunately, I suspect they'd been watching us even closer. The humans had a word for it. Hospitality. It meant making guests comfortable, feeding them, keeping them safe. I was starting to suspect it also meant quietly taking an inventory of everything you owned while you smiled and poured the drinks. Captain Rourke's delegation was given a tour of Vetra Station the next morning. Officially, it was a cultural exchange. Show the newcomers our architecture, our trade hubs, our public spaces. Unofficially, it was a chance to show them that the Accord was strong, organized, and not to be trifled with. They looked impressed. Too impressed. We started at the central promenade. Rourke's aides drifted along the shops and kiosks, chatting with vendors, asking friendly questions about cargo volumes and supply schedules. Their curiosity was relentless but wrapped in disarming enthusiasm. This is remarkable, Rourke said, glancing up at the layered concourses. How many entry points? 8, I said without thinking. Efficient. Plenty of redundancy, he replied, as if I'd told him the weather. Our next stop was the primary docking ring. The engineering team was working on a minor alignment issue with the east clamps. Rourke crouched beside a maintenance hatch, peering at the servo mechanisms. Mind if we take a look? He asked the chief engineer, already halfway inside the access panel. They didn't just look. Within 20 minutes, they'd recalibrated the clamps, smoothed the movement cycle, and halved the strain on the actuator arms. The chief engineer was thrilled. Your people know their way around machinery. Rourke grinned. We like to keep things in working order. I noticed they'd also uploaded a fresh diagnostic suite, one that just happened to ping the station's entire defensive grid. The cultural exchange continued in the Grand Hall, where the Kirill musicians performed a centuries-old ballad. The humans listened politely, applauding at all the right moments. Then Rourke's team offered to return the favor with a song from Earth. What followed was a 3-minute auditory assault involving amplified strings, heavy percussion, and a voice that sounded halfway between a battle cry and a celebration. Half the Terran delegation winced. The Forans, sensitive to bass resonance, twitched visibly. "My apologies," Rourke said afterward, his voice warm with sincerity. "Music is a powerful thing. Moves the spirit. Sometimes into unexpected places." I wasn't sure if that was a cultural note or a warning. That evening, negotiations began in the council chamber. Officially, we were discussing tariff alignments and cross-border shipping rights. The humans presented themselves as eager partners, willing to concede on agricultural imports and mining royalties. They gave ground generously, too generously. By the end of the session, everyone was congratulating them for their flexibility. It took me an extra hour to realize they'd quietly secured unrestricted access to Corridor Theta, a narrow but vital shipping lane through the galactic core. The kind of route that could, in the right hands, cut supply times in half, or choke an empire in days. The next day brought the first incident. A freighter limped into dock with hull damage, reporting a pirate ambush on the outer rim. The humans were already moving before the council finished debating a response. One of their destroyers, the Resolute, executed what they called an emergency docking to unload relief supplies. It was the first time I'd seen a human warship up close. It was ugly in a deliberate way, angular, armored, built without a single aesthetic flourish. The weapons were powered down, but even dormant they dwarfed our station's defenses. The pirate threat was neutralized within hours. The Resolute returned with minimal damage and 3 new garrison agreements in hand, offers from grateful colony leaders who now saw humans as indispensable. I confronted Rourke about it over a diplomatic dinner. "You responded quickly," I said. "Almost as if you knew the attack was coming." He cut a piece of some Earth delicacy, seared meat, still steaming, and smiled faintly. "We don't start fights, Ambassador. We just make sure we finish them." Polite. Come. But there was an edge under it, like the quiet click of a weapon being loaded. The council began to split over the humans. The Kirill and Von Nix saw them as saviors. The Terran and Forans grumbled about their accidental advantages. The Draxians remained silent, which was more concerning than open hostility. Through it all, Rourke played both sides perfectly, offering help to one faction while reassuring another that their sovereignty was untouched. He never seemed rushed, never raised his voice, never lost that measured confidence. The turning point came during a tense session on trade disputes. The Kirill chieftain accused the Terran envoy of withholding mineral shipments. Voices rose. Threats were implied. The air thickened with the scent of escalating hostility. And Rourke laughed. Not mockery, not derision. Just a warm, genuine-sounding laugh that broke the rhythm of the argument. Everyone looked at him. "Forgive me," he said, still smiling. "You're both too clever to be trapped in this kind of deadlock. We can sort this. Let's step back before words turn into wounds." The fight bled out of the room. Even the Kirill looked momentarily embarrassed. The discussion shifted. Agreements were made. It was only later, replaying the scene in my mind, that I realized the laugh had been perfectly timed, cutting the tension just long enough to steer the outcome. I began to pay closer attention. When Rourke's aides wandered the station, they never visited the same place twice in one day, yet somehow mapped the entire layout in less than a week. When they offered help with minor repairs, those systems ran smoother afterward, but also stored logs in formats compatible with human tech. And when they told jokes in private, they weren't about diplomats or trade. They were about siege tactics, supply chain choke points, and the time one of them had played a whole war game with only the kitchen staff. One evening, I passed the human quarters and heard voices through a half-open door. 3 sectors in 6 months, tops, one said. Depends on resistance, another replied. But yeah, once the lanes are ours, it's just mopping up. A pause. Then Rourke's voice, calm as ever. No rush. Let them invite us in. Makes everything cleaner. I kept walking. If they saw me, they didn't show it. By the end of the week, the station felt subtly different. Not overtly changed. Commerce still flowed, patrols still ran, but the humans were woven into everything now. They managed the new docking schedule. They had friends in every trade guild. They were part of security drills. Even the council staff started picking up their idioms. I couldn't point to a single illegal act. But the pattern was there, like a net being drawn closed one thread at a time. The last night before the next round of negotiations, I found Rourke on the observation deck again. He was looking at the star map this time, tracing routes with one finger. Planning a trip? I asked. He didn't look up. Always. You never know when the weather might change. In space, there's no weather, I said. He finally glanced at me, that same slow smile returning. There's always weather, Ambassador. You just have to know what you're looking for. I went back to my quarters that night with a gnawing certainty. Humans weren't just learning about the Accord. They were positioning themselves inside it. The change came with fire. A distress signal hit the council net just after dawn cycle. 3 colonies under pirate siege on the rimward expanse. The attackers weren't raiding for cargo, they were burning settlements. The council launched into debate about whether to send aid, how much, and from which fleets. By the time the first vote was called, the humans had already acted. The Resolute and 2 smaller escorts jumped within minutes. Not hours. Minutes. I monitored the tactical feed from the command deck. The human formation hit the pirate flotilla from an angle no sane commander would use, threading through debris fields, skimming unstable asteroid orbits. They didn't trade broadsides. They hunted. Isolated. Cut. Within 47 minutes, the pirates were in full retreat. The survivors' ships were stripped of weapons and left adrift for retrieval. Relief messages poured in from the colonies. In gratitude, their governors offered the humans temporary defensive jurisdiction over 3 sectors. Temporary. I'd learned enough about humans by now to know that word was negotiable. I cornered Rourke in the debriefing lounge afterward. He was reviewing sensor logs, sipping something steaming from a metal cup. You moved before the council even approved aid, I said. He didn't look up. We don't wait for permission to stop slaughter, Ambassador. You also didn't wait for anyone to question how your ships were in jump range before the distress call. Now he met my eyes. The smile was there, but thinner. We're prepared. Always. That kind of readiness isn't preparation, I said. It's positioning. He took another sip, unbothered. Call it what you like. The colonies are safe. Safe. Or claimed. The line between the two was starting to blur. The council was split wide open. The Kirill and Varnix praised the humans as saviors. The Terran accused them of opportunism. The Draxians simply watched, which in their culture meant they were already planning countermeasures. Rourke navigated the split like a veteran smuggler through an asteroid belt. To the grateful, he spoke of shared values and mutual defense. To the wary, he swore no interest in territorial expansion, while quietly reinforcing human patrol schedules in their neighboring sectors. That same week, I attended a private function, half social, half political. The humans had sent a smaller delegation this time, all smiles and handshakes. The turning point was a confrontation between Rourke and a Terran trade minister, a blunt, quarrelsome male with little patience for subtlety. "You're circling us," the minister accused. Every move you make brings you closer to controlling the core lanes. Rourke didn't argue. He laughed. A soft, amused sound that drew every ear in the room. Minister, if we wanted the lanes, we'd already have them, he said. We're here for peace. But peace needs strong hands to hold it. The Tyrann had no reply. He left early. It wasn't until later that I realized the laugh had broken his momentum before the argument could peak, a maneuver I'd seen Rourke use before. Weaponized warmth. By now I was keeping my own logs. Not of their public moves, those were visible to anyone, but of the smaller patterns. Their technical assistance requests always coincided with access to new data networks. Their goodwill missions inevitably passed through sectors with valuable mineral or energy resources. Every concession they made in negotiations was in an area with no strategic value. And always, that smile. As if each move was a friendly favor, instead of a calculated step in a larger design. One night, I caught fragments of conversation as I passed the human quarters. Logistics hubs online within the quarter, one voice said. Push slower, Rourke replied. The more they think it's their idea, the less resistance we get. A murmur of agreement. Then silence. I moved on before anyone opened the door. The next day brought another coincidence. A merchant convoy reported engine trouble near Corridor Theta, the same shipping lane humans had secured weeks earlier. Rourke's ships responded before the distress call even reached the Council. By the time we received the full report, the convoy had been repaired, refueled, and rerouted under human escort. The official logs described it as a temporary protective measure. I couldn't shake the feeling that every one of these measures was another thread in a net I couldn't yet see the shape of. I finally asked him directly. You're building something, I said as we stood by the star map in the observation gallery. He studied the glowing lines of the trade lanes. We're making sure the galaxy's less chaotic. That sounds like control. That sounds like survival, he countered. His tone was calm, but the subtext was iron. To a predator, control and survival were the same thing. 2 rotations later, the Council held a closed-session summit. The topic: human expansion. Half the chamber wanted formal limits. The other half argued that limiting humanity's reach meant leaving sectors vulnerable to piracy. Rourke said almost nothing during the debate. He didn't need to. His allies, many of them not human, spoke for him. When the vote came, the limits were rejected. Instead, the Council passed a mutual defense compact, granting humans full rights to station forces in any member sector requesting aid. It was, in effect, a free pass to place military assets wherever they chose. Afterward, I found him alone in one of the side corridors, checking something on a handheld device. You didn't even speak, I said. He smiled, and this time it was different. No warmth. No invitation. Just the flash of a predator's teeth. Ambassador, when the herd is already moving where you want, you don't waste energy chasing it. That night, I dreamed of fences. Not walls. Fences. The kind you build slowly, post by post, until the herd looks up and realizes the open plain has vanished. When I woke, I knew the smile had changed. It was no longer the mask of a friendly newcomer. It was the expression of a hunter who knew the prey was already within reach. The council chamber was chaos wrapped in ceremonial robes. Half the alien delegates were shouting, the other half were trying to pretend they weren't terrified. The human stood at the center of it all, hands clasped behind his back, wearing the same patient smile that had been haunting my nightmares since the negotiation began. No, not a smile. A warning painted in politeness. You can't possibly expect the Varik Empire to agree to these terms, one of the scaled diplomats hissed. They're outrageous. The human, Commander Marcus Hale, tilted his head slightly. Outrageous? That's such an interesting word. I suppose it all depends on whether you've got the luxury of time to debate. He spoke like he was discussing tea flavors, but the way the room went still told me everyone felt the steel under his tone. Even the air recyclers seemed quieter. Ambassador Selra, the usually smug Tridathian envoy, leaned forward. Your proposal includes full decommissioning of our fleet, dismantling of our shipyards, and... Marcus raised one hand, palm outward. No. That's the short-term proposal. I think you're forgetting the part about your military leadership resigning permanently and your borders being monitored for, let's call it, a few centuries. A ripple of disbelief spread through the room. No empire in the known galaxy had ever agreed to such humiliation. But then, no empire had ever been on the wrong side of a human smile. I'd been observing this man for 3 days, and I'd learned something dangerous. He wasn't bluffing. He never bluffed. He simply knew that whatever trap he'd set was already snapping shut. What happens, the Cherith representative asked slowly, if we decline? Marcus's smile widened by a fraction. That's easy. We leave. I almost laughed. Leave. That was the weakest threat imaginable, until I saw the flicker of recognition on the faces of the elder species. They knew. You mean, Selra stopped mid-sentence, scales paling. You wouldn't. Oh, I absolutely would, Marcus said cheerfully. In fact, that's the beauty of it. We don't have to fire a single shot. We simply stop helping. That didn't sound like much until you remembered what humanity had been doing for the last decade. Patching failing atmospheric systems, feeding starving worlds, holding back rogue AI fleets, and keeping certain inconvenient truths about other species' war crimes very, very quiet. Take that away, and the galaxy didn't just wobble, it collapsed. Selra finally lost her composure. You're holding the entire galaxy hostage. Hostage? Marcus repeated, blinking innocently. No. Hostages are alive because someone threatens to kill them. This, he gestured broadly at the chamber, is just maintenance. We decide whether to keep the lights on. Or not. A shiver went down my spines. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. The Varik delegate's voice cracked. What if another species tries to replace you? Marcus actually chuckled at that. Then I'll watch with great interest. It'll be educational. Like letting toddlers play with a fusion core. The silence that followed was the kind you only get when every person in the room is calculating the exact size of the noose around their neck. Then, as if on cue, the chamber doors opened. 2 human officers entered, crisp uniforms, no weapons visible, but both carried data pads. Marcus glanced at one, read whatever it displayed, and nodded almost imperceptibly. He turned back to the council. Well, it seems one of our contingency devices just went live. Not by my order, of course. I'd hate to be seen as rushing anyone. What device? Someone demanded. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he tapped the table. A holographic display bloomed into existence, showing an orbital view of the Cherith homeworld. Massive lights in orbit, human-built repair arrays, were going dark, one by one. In the shadows they left, you could see the faint silhouettes of structures drifting. Not military stations. Climate control satellites. Planetary shield generators. You can have them back, Marcus said, voice still warm and conversational, if you sign. I'd thought I understood human tactics. Intimidation, overwhelming force, surprise strikes. But this was different. He wasn't attacking. He was withdrawing. Letting entropy do his work for him. The Cherith rep sagged in his seat. Selra looked like she'd swallowed acid. Even the Varric's 4 eyes were wide with something dangerously close to respect. You planned this from the start, Selra whispered. Of course, Marcus said. We always plan ahead. It's part of the smile. That was when I realized the full trap. Every time we thought we were gaining an advantage in negotiations, every concession they'd reluctantly made, Every helpful bit of technology they'd shared, it had all been positioned so that removing it later would cause maximum collapse. The humans had been building their leverage while pretending they were just being neighborly. Marcus walked toward the exit, then paused in the doorway. "Oh, one last thing. If anyone thinks about calling our bluff..." He turned just enough for everyone to see his expression. It was still a smile, but not the diplomatic kind. This was the bare-toothed predator's grin that biology had never quite bred out of humanity. "Just remember," he said softly, "we didn't start with war because we like peace. We started with peace because it's cheaper. War's just the deluxe package." Then he was gone. The chamber erupted into frantic private comms. Threat assessments. Capitulation drafts. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, I sat frozen, finally understanding the title of the human's earlier speech. The day I saw a human smile, and realized we were already defeated. Because the war wasn't coming. It was already over.